welcome to the subject software engineering. Today we will make beginning of the new chapter, that is system models. The objective of this chapter system model 1, to introduce a number of system models that may be developed during the requirements engineering process. Students, when you carry out requirement engineering process, you have to develop a model of the system so that the user and the developer do understand how the system is going to function, and we can analyze and collect lot of information. Point number 2, to learn why it is important to establish the boundaries of the system and the model its context. In this chapter, we will also learn why it is important to establish boundaries of the system and model its context. See, system exists in an environment. So we must know what is the system, what are its boundaries, what is its environment. All this you can understand if you limit the boundaries of the system and model its environment. Point number 3, to understand concepts of behavioral modeling, data modeling and object modeling. Point number 4, to understand notations defined in unified modeling language and how these notations may be used to develop system and system models. So we are just listed the objective of this chapter, a new chapter called system models. Now we will take up the introduction. So topics for study in this chapter would be 1, we will have introduction part, then context model, point number 2, behavior model, then 3, data model, 4, object model, and 5th, structural methods. So these are topics that you are going to study in this chapter, system models. Today we will take up the introduction part of it. So this part will introduce us to the chapter system model. Point number 1, user requirements should be written in natural language because they have to be understood by the people who are not technical experts. So students, on the earlier occasion also we have studied that the user's requirement must be written in natural language because users have different background and they are not technical people. So they will write the user requirements in natural language. Point number 2, whereas system requirements being more detailed are expressed in a more technical way. So students, you know that system requirements are the basis for developing a system. So these are more detailed and these have got technical aspects also. The terms used here are more technical because system requirements are the basis on which system is developed by the software developer. Point number 3, one widely used technique is to document the system specification as a set of system model. So students, system model is a technique to document the system specification. Next, point number 1, system models are graphical representation that 1, describe the business process, second, the problem to be solved, and third, the system that is being developed. So students, system model is a graphical representation. Why graphical representation? Because human being can understand graphical representation very quick. So this representation describe the business process, how the business is going on, what is the input to the business, what is the output, how it is processed, all these aspects. And second, the problem being to be solved. So what is the problem being faced for which we are developing a system. And third, it will also tell you how the system is to be developed. Point number 2, because of the graphical representation used, models are often more understandable than detailed natural language description of the system requirements. Students, as I have told you earlier, graphical representation are very easy to understand for human being. So, they are more better than the natural language representation. Point number 3, models are also an important bridge between the analysis and design process. So models, forms a bridge between the analysis and design, because that becomes a common point between the system developer and the user or participating people. Let us know what are the different models. So representation of system from different perspectives results in different models. So students, the way you look at the system, through what angle you look or what are your interests, accordingly your model is developed. For example, 1, a external perspective. If you adopt external perspective where context or environment of the system is modeled, this will result into context model. So if you take a external perspective where you will study context and the environment, then you develop a context model. Point number 2, a behavioral perspective where the behavior of the system is modeled, this resulting into behavioral model. So students, if you look from how the system behaves, then you will get a behavioral model. Continuing this, point number 3, a structural perspective, where the architecture of the system or the structure of the data processed by the system is modeled. This results into structural method. So students, if you look from structural perspective, wherein we more depend upon the architecture of the system or the structure, the way the data is processed, then we will get structural methods. Let us come back to the topic system model. Point number 1, the most important part of the system model is that it picks up a salient characteristics and leaves out details. Students, why system model is important? Because it considers only important or salient characteristics and leaves out the details which are less relevant, so that it simplifies the system. Point number 2, system model is an abstraction of the system being studied. So students, system model is a small representation or abstraction of system being studied. It is not alternative representation. Point number 3, different types of system models are based on different approaches to the abstraction. So students, earlier we have studied, the way you abstract the model, so the model is developed. So what approach you take to develop the abstraction, accordingly accordingly model is developed. Earlier we have studied the context model, the behavior model, the structural model. So these are different approaches to the abstraction. For example, a context model shows how the system being modeled is positioned in an environment with the other system and the processes. They define the boundaries of the system. So students, as I told you earlier, context model tells how the system for which you are developing a model is placed in an environment. What are its other systems and other processes, and what are its boundaries? All this is represented as a context model. Second example is behavioral model. Okay, this behavioral model is used to describe the overall behavior of the system. Okay. Number 3, object model describes the logical system entities and their classification and aggregation. So students, okay, object model will tell us the logical system, what are the participating entities, how they are related, how they are classified, and what is the aggregation level. All this is studied in the object model. So today we have introduced ourselves to the new chapter, that is system model. The detailed topics will be taken in the next session. So you will study this, and if there is anything you may ask me. Okay. Thank you.